Good afternoon. I'm David Cassak from Windover Information, and welcome to this latest installment of the Stanford Biodesign programs from the Innovator's Workbench series. You know, over the past several years, we've featured on this stage people with an extraordinarily wide variety of backgrounds and orientations: physicians, entrepreneurs, business executives, those who work primarily in the U.S., those whose domain is Europe. But we've never combined so many different perspectives in one person as we do tonight with Guy Lebeau of Cordis. A physician by training, Guy has worked at Johnson & Johnson since the early 1990s and has most recently been running Cordis. He does so by bringing a physician's insight, an executive sharp eye, and a uniquely Gallic perspective. He's a keen observer and commentator on issues surrounding innovation and the role that corporations play in bringing new technology to market, observations that arise in no small part from his internal dialogue between that of a physician by training and his role in the executive suite of one of the world's leading cardiovascular device companies. Last month, Ron Dollins was here, and we noted that given the recent announcement that Johnson & Johnson was buying Guidant, Ron Dollins was leaving his position with a bang. Well, today we welcome someone living in the midst of that explosion, Guy Lebeau. Guy, welcome, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So I know you grew up in France and trained as a transplant surgeon. Anything lead you to medicine early on? Did you feel a calling, or how did you get into the whole field of medicine?
Okay, you start with a tough question. No, seriously, I probably decided to go to med school like everybody else because my father told me where I need to go. And in the same time, I believe med school was probably the only thing that I can do at this time because I was not so good in, I will say high school. And in France, when you are not very good somewhere, you go in medical school.
In the U.S., it's just the opposite.
Okay.
So
I'm learning.
I know you got your start at Ethicon and Ethicon endosurgery. Interesting enough, as a surgeon who didn't particularly believe in minimally invasive surgery, what attracted you to Johnson & Johnson, and how did the connection come about to Johnson & Johnson in particular, as opposed to, say, a French company?
Okay, second bad question in 2 minutes is going to be difficult. No, seriously, I believe the example you gave about, I will say, minimal invasive surgery, when I arrived in Johnson & Johnson, after 10 interviews, because when you start with Johnson & Johnson, you have to go to 10 interviews before to have the right to talk to you potential, I will say, boss. And the first question they asked me is, what do you think about minimal invasive surgery? I was at this time professor of surgery, and I was absolutely against, I will say, laparoscopic surgery because I didn't see the future. And then I say, okay, it's going to have a small potential. It's going to take 10% of the future of surgery. I was obviously totally wrong. But, they still recruit me. That means even a big company like Johnson & Johnson can make mistake.
What were you going to do? I mean, what was it that attracted you to the business side of things? And what was your first job at Johnson & Johnson for Ethicon?
I will say, to try to understand motivation, you have an official motivation and non-official motivation. I will give you the first one. It's an official one, but it's probably a true one. When you are a surgeon, you are taking care of, 300, 500 patients a year. And when somebody came in front of you and telling, hey, you are going to take care of 1 million patients a year, I believe you approach the issue in another way. And probably the official, but also a big motivation was, I'm going to influence the life of 1 million patients. But on a non-official point of view, it's a more personal motivation. Is, when you go to surgery is a great job, don't get me wrong, but to try to start again from zero, from scratch. I was 36 years old. I worked as a hell to try to be a surgeon. And at 36, you say, why not to try something else? And the pleasure to accept, to face a totally different challenge, where you're going to have to use, I didn't know at this time, that you're going to have to use totally different skills, I believe is the best luxury in life. And I wish really each of you to go through that, because you start to accept that what you learn, and I can tell you in terms of ego, when you're a 36 years old surgeon, you really believe you are God. And God doesn't believe he's not a surgeon, but that is another issue. What I try to tell you here is accepting to start from zero again is really a pleasure.
So what were those early days like at Johnson & Johnson? I'm making the assumption that there was a huge difference in the way that you looked at the world as a surgeon and looked at technology and the way you did suddenly as a business executive working for Johnson & Johnson. Was it a difficult adjustment? Did you wake up some day saying, what did I get myself into here? I've got to...
Yes. For 18 months, I told myself every morning how I made a so big mistake. But seriously again I totally underestimate the change. Because when you work in an hospital environment, you exist through your technical competency. Your authority is coming from your knowledge. And in a company, it's not exactly the same. Don't get me wrong. I don't say that you don't need to be competent in company. But what I'm saying is the way you connect, the way you interact with people is a way more important than your deep knowledge. And I was, 36 years with in mind that I'm going to learn fast. I'm going to answer a question faster than anybody else. I'm going to challenge anybody in front of me intellectually. And I arrive in a company where the issue is totally opposite. The issue is you have to let the other win. You have, as a leader of a company, you have to accept that it's not your success who is going to make you successful, but it's the success of the company. And I believe for the first 18 months, I was honestly struggling with that. Mm-hmm. But I was lucky. I got my sister, who was a human resource VP in a big company, and I saw her every Friday afternoon for 18 months. And I told her every Friday all the mistakes I made during the week. Mm-hmm. And she said, you cannot do that in a company. You cannot do that in a company. Then she taught me how to behave in a company environment. And I believe it's worse than a shrink. To go from an hospital to a company is really totally different way to behave, totally different way to approach issues. But in the same time, is on an agility, an intellectual agility point of view, that is a real pleasure.
It's interesting that you phrase it that way because, as you say, as a business executive, you have to let other people win. But as a surgeon, you have to be in as total control as you possibly can of the situation.
I believe it's an empty word, and don't get me wrong again, but if you don't believe you are the best, you have the responsibility to let somebody else doing the case. And I believe it's something you have to accept. It's come with your job. If you don't believe you are really competent, you cannot do the case. And it's not exactly the same approach in a business environment.
You also, I think, must look at failure differently. Someone told me that one of the things that struck you most was the way you looked at risk as a transplant surgeon and the way you look at risk as a business executive. You look at them in two different ways, but you had to adjust suddenly to failures and misstarts and starting all over again, which for a surgeon, if you have a high percentage of those, it's deadly for your career.
Yeah, it's funny, I probably didn't think about the risk-taking the same way, but it's the same process. Meaning that if in a transplant environment or in a surgical environment, you know that you are going to see your mistake 7 days after. Or between the 3rd day and the 7th day of a procedure, you know if you made a mistake or not. And in business, you know that you made a mistake when you are in another job. And I really love the second solution. But
after Ethicon endosurgery, you moved to Biosense Webster. How did that transition come about, and why did you make that move, and what did you do for Biosense Webster?
Biosense Webster is a marvelous story because I took the job, and at this time, I was living in Paris. Biosense and Webster was the consolidation of two companies. One was in South California, was Webster, startup environment. The other one was in Israel, in Haifa, startup environment. But you have 9,000 miles between the two. I can tell you, it's not exactly the same culture. And just give you an example. I will say I I really have to adapt Monday morning here and adapt to the Israeli group the Wednesday, and I have to talk with both the Friday and be sure that these two groups are going to work together. And in the same time, I really enjoy because intellectually on the both sides you have extremely smart people. And that means we have to create everything from scratch, product obviously, but also a new market on AFib, atrial fibrillation, this disease from the upper part of the heart. And really, we have a lot of freedom because when in Johnson & Johnson, where you are below $200 million, it's okay. You can do what you want. And I really believe, again, is something is key. And I learned a lot about, I will say, how to help people, how to manage people. Because when you work on a global, I will say, dimension like that, you have to adapt. And that is a lot of teaching for your own behavior. And it's probably one of the jobs I got with Johnson & Johnson where I learned a lot about how to lead and how to manage.
So you were learning a whole new clinical space at that time, cardiology, when you hadn't been in. Was that a difficult transition? What was it like suddenly becoming a specialist in cardiology, which is because it's a field that you've stayed in through now?
I will say on a pure medical point of view, I really was extremely difficult for me because I realized that I have to go back to med school, understand, I will say, the field deeply, and I didn't know the field at all, At the same time, on a business point of view, because you're an NMD, everybody believes that you know everything in medicine. That means you can hide yourself in a business environment because you are an MD, and people believe you know something. And I play with that for a long time. What's
interesting is, I'm not certain a lot of people know that, but the coronary stent program at Johnson & Johnson actually got started within Ethicon. And coronary stents were taking off when you were at Biosense Webster. Did you have any previous exposure to the coronary stent program when you were at Ethicon and Ethicon Endosurgery? And what impact, if any, did the sudden stent mania, coronary stents, bare metal stents, have on Biosense Webster in the mid-1990s?
First, honestly, I was not in Ethicon Inc. when they started the program. But to come back to what was the relation between the Biosense Webster and the stent program was a really a totally new approach, and we put a lot of resources in Johnson & Johnson on this program at this time, meaning that there was a way more visibility for the program in Johnson & Johnson than for Biosense One. That means we were the last kids of the family with Biosense, and we were doing what we can do at this time. Mm-hmm. But the stent, I would say, took a lot of human resource, and we put really the smartest people in a way. That is the reason I was not in the group at this time, to be able to develop this new field.
You once told me that one of the things that you experienced in cardiology was that the pace of competition in the clinical area was so fast that it drove innovation just as fast, and that stents were a good example of how quickly innovation comes in cardiology. Talk a little bit about the pace of innovation and what it means to people who are practicing in that clinical space.
I think that before you enter in the cardiovascular field, in a medtech point of view, you don't realize that the pace of this market is really different from the other. And I believe it's coming from different things. It's coming from the customer. I mean, the people who are using the tools are extremely keen to have new technology, new approach. That means the demand is very high. At the same time, you have big company with a lot of resource in this field, meaning that when you make a mistake in this field, you pay it fast. And because the guy in front of you did not make a mistake and move. That means really is making you thinking faster and faster to try to anticipate what the others are going to make. Mm-hmm. And that create an environment which is really extremely high in terms of motivation, because you know that if you make a mistake, you are going to see it very fast, faster than any other business. And you have this competition in terms of new approach to a disease that I'm really enjoying. And the reason I'm really enjoying my job also today is every day I had somebody in front of me telling me, Guy, we need to go in this field. We need to do that. We need to do this investment. And each day I have to say, why? And I believe that is really a way to stimulate all the company to go fast. And that makes the atmosphere.
Well, you know, particularly in cardiovascular, say we're in an era of evidence-based medicine. Given your training as a physician, when you talk about the rapid pace of innovation, do you say to yourself, that's great, and anything that we as Johnson & Johnson can do to bring new tools to the market will help to do? Or do you look at that and say, look, I know as a physician that we need time to assess technology and to test it in the marketplace and in patients? Do you sometimes think as a physician, unlike as a business executive, that the pace of technology innovation is too fast, or can it not come fast enough for you?
I believe it's a good question. It's probably where I'm struggling is not the right word, but I'm trying to balance myself, trying to be able to have a pure MD approach in front of, for example, an iteration on a product that I believe is not going to, I would say, bring really clinical value, and try to stop the company not to go too much, excuse me for the marketing people, on a pure marketing approach, but try to go more on a added value approach on a clinical point of view. And it's probably the reason I'm in front of you today. Why do you believe Johnson & Johnson decided to put somebody like me in a job? It's because they believe that, and I try to do that, to try to balance my decision-making between this pure marketing approach to pure, I would say, clinical and value approach. And I believe that that is probably where is the right approach, is to be able to be in the middle.
Well, given that perspective, and we'll come back in a second to how you got from Biosense Webster to Cordis, we are now, and Cordis was the leader in this, in what is by far the most extraordinary device development effort we've ever seen, which is drug-eluting stents. Talk about how drug-eluting stents has impacted cardiovascular companies like Cordis. Has it changed the model or the goals? It's by far the biggest product that we've ever developed. Does it put a lot of pressure on companies like Cordis to develop the next drug-eluting stent, much the way that pharmaceutical companies are always under pressure to develop the next blockbuster drug? What do you think drug-eluting stents have meant to Cordis?
I think if you go back and you understand where was Cordis, I will say, 96, Cordis was a very successful company with the first stent in the market. 98, we got 20% of the market. We were losing share every day. And I mean, a company start at the top, and 2 years after was really, okay, we missed the train in the middle. Then inside the company was, okay, we're going to come back, and we're going to leapfrog. And the motivation was a crisis. And as leader, the best way to motivate a company is to create a crisis. In 99% of the case, you don't create it, you have to live with. But I will say...
Someone else will create it for you.
Exactly that. But at the same time, if you want to innovate, you need to have a crisis. And if there's a lesson to learn from the story of the DES, I mean, drug-eluting stent for Cordis, is that creativity and this innovation came from a crisis. And at this time, we were already late with our development. There was competition who made deal with farm company for a drug, to put a drug on the stents. And we knew that we have to go faster than anybody else. And there was a story that I'm using because for me it's so against the common sense. The leader of the group at this time arrived in front of the 100 engineers who were working on DES and told them, guys, we have only 2 years and a half to be able to develop this product. Then I'm going to cut your group by half. And 50 people are going to work on DES, and 50 other people are going to do what they want. But the 50 people who are going to work on DES are going to do only that, and I don't want to see you before 6 months. That means the leader of this group took a decision to reduce the number of people, which seems to be exactly the opposite to do, because the issue was to go as fast as they can, and to accept not to be on the top of these people every day, because he asked these people to come back in 6 months. And I believe here is an excellent example of how smart has to be a leader in a very difficult environment. The pressure on this person at this time was very high. All people in G&G say, okay, when are you going to develop the next DES? And he was able to stand up and to say, I don't care. I trust the group is going to, and we are going to leave them alone. And I think that is something that each of us has to remember. When you want to manage people, leave them alone. And in terms of innovation, is one thing that we try to do in Cordis is to leave pocket of freedom. We are here just to be free. We are here just to enjoy every day what we want to do. That means in R&D, in research and development, on my point of view, the rule is leave the people alone. And big company like us, we're exactly going the other direction. We are creating rules. We're existing just by rules. And we have to accept the ambiguity to have in this marvelous, organized company to have pocket of freedom when people are going to do what they want. Excuse me, I was a little long.
No, I think that's actually a very fascinating way of looking at it. So do you try to put in some accountability to those creative folks who are coming up with the next product? Or really do you simply say to yourself, let them do what they want to do. They'll have something for us in time, and it'll be great. How do you address then the business issues of we've got to get a return from that effort at some point?
I believe you need to give a direction to the group. You need to be in front of this group of engineers and to tell them, first, you need to have an MD in your group. I mean, you have MD who you want, but somebody who clinically know the situation and practice. I mean, again, the big issue is, this lack of connection between the clinical side and the pure engineering design. And that means you have to tell them, okay, be sure that you are in contact with the people who are using the tool every day. And then you give them the direction. There's a clinical need there, then come back with a solution. But then you have to leave them alone on a resource point of view, on the way they want to work and things like that. But you have to give a direction and a date. That means you have to say, okay, in 1 year you are back and you tell me what you're going to do.
You once told me that for as successful as Cypher has been, and it's been extremely successful for Cordis, you don't necessarily see the company's future in terms of drug-eluting stents.
Yeah,
is that a hard sell internally?
Yes, because when you make a so successful product like DES, the will of everybody in a company is say, hey, we are going to do a little new one and a little new one, and we are going to create this momentum for the next 10 years. But in the same time, everybody knows that what happened with a DES can happen with something else. And accepting that the solution that we have today is not, or what we learned the last 5 years with DES, is probably not the next solution. That means it is again accepting and having the humility to see that the success of what we did, we are not going to be able to use that for the next approach. And that's probably where is the most difficult things we have to accept as manager and leader is what we learn. We have to forget it. You say, no, Guy, you are provocative here, it's not possible. But I think that is something that we have to have in mind, even if it's not obviously every day true, but to have this doubt about our own knowledge and distrust in our knowledge to accept to be able to listen.
Yeah, you've said that product company success is really a picture of the past, and you've got to be focusing on the next technology.
Yeah, because I believe it's what I'm struggling. And more you are older and older, more you believe your experience is important. And more I'm in business, more I have to say that to force myself to accept that what I learned is just what I learned.
It's interesting that you frame it that way, because you mentioned before about telling the R&D folks that they've got to talk to the customers and then setting them free. Jay Yadov of the Cleveland Clinic once noted that Cordis took a lot of criticism because there was no follow-on stent to the or no successful follow-on stent to the palmar shots. The crown stent was not well accepted in the marketplace. And Jay Yatta's point was that Cordis's mistake wasn't not having a next product, but that actually in listening to some of the thought leader interventionalists, it got the wrong advice. The company was told that by the thought leaders that what interventionalists want is a more stable stent, a bigger struts, but really what the run-of-the-mill interventionalist wanted was more flexibility, and that's where Guidant and AVE came in and took the market away from them. I wonder what that says to you, that anecdote says to you about the relationship between internal product development at a company like Cordis and reaching out to customers and to physicians to help drive the next generation of technology, particularly given your background as a physician.
I honestly, I don't know the reason we did not have the right product after the first one. But what I believe is not an issue if we did work with the right group or not the right group. It's the fact that in medical field, you need to, I will say, connect with a lot of different MD or in a lot of different practice to be able to understand what is the need. And it's not three names who can give you the solution. And obviously it's not engineer alone in a company who can invent the future. That means it's probably this balance that is key to be able to develop the right product, I will say.
So how much do you think Cordis's innovations coming forward will come from ideas fed to it outside from its physician customers? And how much do you think it will be these teams of creative engineers working inside to develop new technology? Because the criticism sometimes of engineers is that they're too removed from what clinicians really want, and they develop the next great product based on engineering principles but not on sound medicine. How much do you think you're going to rely on physicians for the next generation of Cordis technology, and how much do you think you'll look internally?
There's a study was done, I believe, in 2002, where it shows that if you take the 15 most successful medical device in the last 15 years, 86% of this came of an idea from an MD. We're practicing. That means if you take the 15 one, a huge part of them came from MD. That means for Cordis, it's obvious that we are going to have a future if MD are going to tell us what to do. Now, how we are going to connect close enough? In a company, you have to accept to be ambidextrous. That means you have a group of engineers who are working on iteration on product, a group of engineers who are working on core knowledge to create a product that is going to use what you have inside the company in terms of knowledge. And you have also this group of engineers who are working on competencies that you have to acquire in the company or you have to import in the company to be able to develop a new product. Meaning that you have to play with these three different groups of engineers who often are not the same type of engineer. That means you have to understand which type of engineer you have to put where. And I believe that is absolutely key. And also, for a big company like us, on my point of view, the most important, 50% of our pipeline has to come from outside. That means if we believe that because we belong to Johnson & Johnson, we have the power of Johnson & Johnson, we are going to be able to develop inside, I believe is a mistake. What makes Johnson & Johnson a smart company, on my point of view, is because we need to have the humility, and we have the humility to understand that innovation is going to come from outside. And this balance is key.
Now, not to disagree with you, but one of the things that Johnson & Johnson can bring almost uniquely among device companies is a pharmacological perspective or expertise. And you once said that whereas in 1990 interventional cardiovascular therapies were 80% device-based, and today they're about 60% device-based, you predicted that by 2010, 53% of intervention therapies would be drug-based, another 20% would be some drug-device combination, and only 27% pure device-based. Unless something changes radically, that suggests that Cordis is going to become significantly a drug company.
I will say, I don't know if it's going to be in 2010 or 2020, but I'm absolutely sure that device alone is an approach, but I don't believe it's going to grow so much. You're going to have indication, obviously. But with a device, you approach an organ. With the drugs, you approach the cells. And I think that for the future, surgery 15 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, was very simple. You cut. And now in surgery, we try to do things at a different level and to traumatize the less we can the human body. And I believe medicine is going this way. We are going to be so targeted. We are going to try to be sure that we are going to treat only the cells with the disease and not the cells side to it. That is the future. Meaning that for a company like us, if we don't have inside a farm knowledge, that means really a knowledge of what the cells need, and a device knowledge is what the organ needs, then we are not going to be able to provide what is the real need on a patient point of view. And that means, again, is everything is complex and more complex every day. But for a company like us, we have, on my point of view, to recruit now people with a farm background to be able to do something the next 10 years. And if we don't do that now, I think we are not going to be in a powerful situation in 10 years.
There are some folks in the device world working on the next generation of drug-eluting stents who say, look, the drug is really actually a given, because if the drug doesn't bring restenosis rates under 5%, no one's going to adopt it. So the real value of the technology lies in the stent and the stent delivery system and the platform. It sounds like you're arguing something for a different view. And I guess the way to ask this question is, if you had two development teams, one working on the next generation stent delivery platform and one a team of pharmaceutical researchers working on the next drug, where would you place your priorities?
Well, because I belong to Johnson & Johnson, I will tell you in Johnson & Johnson we do both. Great, and I answer your question. If I'm pushing myself a little, I will say that I believe that I will try to find a way not to have a stents and not to have drugs. Because I think that to put alloy on a metal inside an artery is not the solution. That means the body is not created to receive a lot of metal. And I think that we need to work on a way to treat the disease in a different way. And give an example. Stents today are really helping the quality of life of patients. But when we talk about life expectancy, I'm not so sure. And there's not a lot of studies, there's some, who show that we increase the life of the patient. But the issue right now is, okay, open an artery is great, but the issue is to increase the life expectancy of the patient. And we don't have a solution for that. Or we have a partial solution.
We talked about the pace of change for product companies, and some of that I know you posit comes because of the pace of change for cardiologists. You once told me that physicians today have to work twice as hard as they did 10 years ago just to keep up with the new tools and the new procedures and higher patient volumes. And that's why innovation flourishes. Because of that, what are the implications for a product company like Cordis and the changing practice of interventional medicine as we see it today?
On my point of view, 20 years ago, the issue was to come with an innovative device, something which is going to help the MD to do what he has to do. And I would say now we have to provide to the physician the tool, which is going to be a breakthrough approach, but it has to be at a cost that the physician is going and the system can, I will say, accept. That means you have more and more criteria for a successful device. And it's not only innovation, it has to be clinical value and cost. That is the reason the things are going to change, on my point of view, a lot in the coming 10 to 20 years.
As innovation flourishes, and I think you see this most clearly in something like percutaneous valves, the clear demarcations between specialties begin to fade. You started in Biosense Webster, which sold products to electrophysiologists. You then spent some time in the neurovascular business at Cordis, and now are running the whole business. Do you see the walls breaking down between the different specialties in either cardiology or vascular medicine in general? And is that a good thing for Johnson & Johnson, or is it a bad thing when the lines blur, when interventional cardiologists move into areas that had once been the province only of surgeons?
I really believe it's a good thing because, I don't want to come back on the Guidant, I would say, move, but we decide to work with Guidant because we believe by be able to treat a disease from A to Z, I mean from a stents to an ICD, we are going to acquire knowledge which is going to help us to provide the right product for patient. And to try to answer your question, I think the fact that you are going to have now not anymore one cardiologist with one knowledge, but probably 10 different type of cardiologists who are going to, I will say, focus their energy to treat one type of a part of the disease, I believe is excellent. Because we are going to have people who are going to be really focusing on one part of the disease, and the learning and the competency is going to be higher. But obviously, this environment is going to change a lot. And you are going to have not anymore a cardiologist who is going to do something, but you are going to have a cardiovascular lab where you're going to have 10 or 15 different types of cardiologists who are going to, I would say, develop and treat 10 different types of disease and patient.
You mentioned the Guidant deal, and I'd like to ask you a question about that in just a second. But before the acquisition was announced, you did a very interesting co-promotion deal with Guidant. We talked with Ron Dollins a little bit about that. But from your perspective, talk about that, because that kind of deal was unheard of in the medical device space. How did that program come about? Guidant sales reps selling Cypher, and how did you put that program together?
That is an excellent example of why G&G can sometimes really bring something to the party. Is we were device company in G&G, and in device, you don't ask your competitor to work with you to sell your product. That is not in the mind of the device people. But in the pharma environment, they're doing that every day. And we put in charge of the business in US a president were coming off the farm part of Johnson & Johnson. And the first move of the guy was to say, hey, why we don't ask Guidant to work with us? And you have 10 people around the table say, okay, go back to farm, thank you. But at the same time, that was the smartest approach, because we knew that we have the product who can help patients around the world. And it was not an issue of business. It was an issue of ethics. It was an issue of be sure that patients are going to receive this product. That means when we went back to the salespeople and told them, hey, next day you are going to work with Guidant, your friends, salespeople say, excuse me? You telling me I'm going to work with Guidant every day? Yes. And you know what? And you know why? Because that is the only way you're going to be sure that Cypher is going to be used for patients around the world. And we didn't have any bad feedback from the sales force. They did understand very well why we did that, because they understood the value of their product.
What was Guidant's response when you first approached them about doing it?
Why not? No, they were, because I think that the reason of Guidant was very comfortable. It's because they felt at the same time that the knowledge of the two groups together can really bring something to the field. And I believe there was no hesitation from their side.
You know, there's a kind of clinical strategic imperative driving the Guidant and Johnson & Johnson deal. And there are also going to be internal management issues. Are you convinced that Johnson & Johnson and Guidant together will be so much better a company that it's worth the management struggles and hassles of putting two enormous companies together? Do you ever stop and say to yourself, well, ideally it'll work out, but getting there is going to be so difficult? Or do you think the combination of the two will come together easily?
First, in a deal, the main thing is what is intangible. I mean, what is extremely difficult to understand. And what makes us really confident in the value we're going to bring to the field is Guidant and Cordis has so many things in common in the approach that I really believe the merger is going to be a successful merger. That means we are going to be more than two, meaning that we are going to be able to bring something. And again, is the way that I saw people connecting, making me very optimistic in the future.
Mm-hmm. We spoke of the culture of Johnson & Johnson, of both pharmaceutical and devices. I just want to ask you a couple questions about innovation, generally speaking. But one difference between drugs and devices is that drug discovery is such a serendipitous process, while drug devices is much more deliberative and much more iterative. Is there a role for serendipity, for unplanned discoveries in device development, or do you really have to focus on a programmed and streamlined development process in medical devices as you go forward?
I will say, obviously, everybody knows here the difference between the farm development and the device development. The timing is different, the approach is different. The reason I'm in front of you and I'm a device guy, and I want to stay a device guy, is because in device is a stealing process, excuse me for the word, meaning that if you want to innovate in device, you have to steal a concept, an approach in another field, in automobile industry, in airplane industry, and bring these technologies, this alloy, something, in the field of medicine. That means what is marvelous in the device area in medicine, if technology, you can steal that from anywhere around the world, any type of other field, and you bring that. In the farm, it's more difficult to go in the food business and to come back in the farm. Meaning that you really you have to have a curiosity in the device development, who I believe make this environment very, very motivated, I will say.
The reason why I ask it that way is because, as I said, Cordis is so identified with Cypher and drug-eluting stents, but at a conference last year, you listed 6 different areas that you said would be important technology spaces for Cordis in the future: local drug delivery, new polymers, cryotherapy, vulnerable plaque, local catheter diffusion, and injection catheters. And I wonder, how many of those do you see as disruptive technologies? How many of those do you see as incremental advances? And how will that reshape what Cordis is going to be, his portfolio will look like over the course of the next couple of years?
I would say I give an example of this example of, for me, what keeps me up at night. Imagine tomorrow, you have a huge market with stents, and tomorrow somebody come and say, you just put a balloon, like 20 years ago, you try to traumatize the vessels the less you can, and to be sure that you are going to have a healing process, which is going to be the best one, you inject the drugs in the wall of the artery, and you don't put the stents. In one day, you don't have any more stent business. And cardiology is a field that people can shift like that. That means, for me, is a very disruptive, vulnerable plaque. Probably a lot of people in this room know about is, the fact that atheromatosis plaque can move and create an infarct in the myocardium. Imagine if you find a way to put a bioresorbable stents when the stenosis is 20%, 30%. Then a way before you need a stent. Then you are going to, I would say, in one day again, stop the development of the stent market. That is the reason in company, if we don't see that, we are not doing our job. If we don't understand that this type of breakthrough technology can disrupt the future, we are not doing our job.
We're running at the end of our time here, so let me ask you one more question. You said in the past that the challenging thing about innovation is that all of your past experiences are somewhat irrelevant to tomorrow's challenges. How different do you think Cordis will look 5 years from now than it does today?
I will say probably my responsibility as a leader of this company is to be sure that I'm going to hire and I'm going to develop the people who can have the answer in 5 years. Meaning that I don't know if I know where Cordis is going to be in 5 or 10 years. But I will do my job is have a crew of people with a brain who are going to be able to create Cordis in 5 years. Second thing, I'm absolutely sure if I was knowing exactly what Cordis is going to be in 5 years, I will not stay in my job. Somebody is going to take my job. Meaning that in this new field, in this environment, the ability to adapt to change is probably the only way to exist in 5 years.
Great. Well, Guy, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having you.